Welcome to Zero Camber Podcast, the knockoff Martini Works. I am your host, Mike, and
Brendan.
to start things off, I have a question.
Hit me.
What is your top 3 things that you would say how car modification has changed since you were like in your late teens to now? So like, right, what, 20, like the 2010s, 2000s, 2010s to now the 2020s? Like,
Okay.
what's the big stuff, the 3 big things?
So, okay, the first big thing, which is something I don't think I was expecting really at all, especially because younger me was not into like trucks whatsoever, which is funny
Yeah.
because if you follow me on Twitter, I talk a lot about trucks now. To be honest, I feel like, but honestly, the first thing's got to be like the just overall explosion in takeoff that like the truck scene, or I guess more so like the overlanding scene, as far as that pairs with like car modification, has really taken off. Because I feel like, sitting there in high school and the early 20 teens, you didn't really see a lot of that. Like you could
No.
see lifted truck bro stuff,
Yeah. Like
the bro
standard
dozer kind of
redneck
thing.
truck stuff.
Yeah, but it was like most people would either be like, I'm gonna take my Silverado 1500 and I'm gonna lift it 3 inches, or I'm gonna lower it 3 inches. Like it was either big tire, like muddy stuff, or it was like I'm gonna stick big chrome wheels on it, and that was kind of it. I felt
We
like.
I'll be honest, I never saw a lowered truck until I came to Michigan. Grew up like high school right in Illinois, like St. Louis area. Never. Didn't once see a lowered truck. I didn't even know, speaking of the abomination of lowered trucks, the Carolina squat. I didn't even
Oh,
know that was a thing
yes,
until
because I had seen plenty of lowered trucks like growing up in Motor City. Like obviously
yeah.
you'd see them at shows, you'd see them driving around like all the time, especially like small trucks like S10s, Rangers. They're just dragging frame on the freeway because they're
Yeah.
bag.
Yeah.
I always thought that was sick,
I
but
would kill for a bagged S10. That would be so much fun.
yeah, like honestly, those are so sick. I wish mini truck stuff would honestly kind of make a comeback
Oh
because
yeah,
like mini trucking is so cool.
it is.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so like the Carolina squad thing, I honestly had kind of no idea either that like that was a thing that really was
Yeah.
taking off, especially because it's like why would you only lower half the vehicle? Like
Right. It looks so
nobody
fucking stupid.
like nobody's ever gotten an STI before and was like, I think I'm just gonna drop the back of this. Like nobody would do that. So like why that ever became a thing, I really don't know.
I don't know.
It's something I definitely could say I don't understand.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah.
like you said on the overlanding thing, because you brought it up the other day talking about it, and I was thinking right about overlanding, and I think it's from van life culture.
And I agree. I honestly, I definitely agree because I think that is kind of a big part of it. The idea of like being able to kind of just be free, right? Like I feel like that's
Mhm.
kind of like a big topic in today's world. Like if you go online,
Oh
there's
yeah,
always people like, oh, like you need to be financially free. You need to do this. You need to do that. It doesn't matter
yeah,
what platform you go to. You're gonna find some kind of content, right? That's trying to push like the idea that you could go off and do your own things. And I think
absolutely.
overlanding does do that. And also, I really do understand to a good degree why like a lot of people kind of cross over where like they have an overlanding
Hmm.
vehicle and like because like you can do overlanding stuff and it doesn't ruin the reliability of your vehicle.
No,
So I
it
think that
maybe makes the fuel economy worse, but these are usually being done on vehicles that don't have good
yeah,
fuel
like a
economy
Forerunner
anyway.
never got good fuel economy anyway. So
No,
like putting
no.
big wheels and all this other stuff on, it's like okay, so I went from 16 to 12. Like it's not that big of a deal really.
Right.
So, but I think for a lot of people, like you can hop in a Forerunner and you could do this stuff and like you don't really hurt the vehicle. So like for a lot of people, especially newer cars, right? Like
Yeah.
especially you're going to spend 30, 40 grand on a newer gen or a newer fifth gen Forerunner, right? Or
Yeah.
a Tacoma, something like that. If you're 40 grand into it, you're making a probably even more $100 a month payment. It's really not something you want to break, right? So
No.
if you don't want it to break, you don't really want to do stuff, and not that you can really do a whole lot performance wise.
Right, like you're not going out there, you're not putting on like portal axles and like a whole bunch of crawler gear and stuff for all these, because you can make
Right.
an absolutely like workable overlanding rig with mostly cosmetic like it cosmetic-ish, right? Like maybe you need to
Yeah.
put bags or helper springs or things like that, but you're not
Well, even that, I think a
throwing
lot of
it.
it's kind of just more like functionality of the gear, and I think like realistically beyond like probably having a winch so you can do some level of self recovery and
Yeah,
maybe some like protective things like some bumpers or rock sliders
like
or
off-road
uh,
jacks, things to get you
yeah,
out. Yeah,
things that would kind of like benefit you in that if you're in that kind of situation.
yeah,
Like there's plenty of trails you can just go drive a stock Forerunner or a stock Tacoma down, and so like
yeah,
that, and like it's overall pretty big. Plus you kind of get to like the idea of like going and doing these things with your friends. Like you already go camping with your friends, so why not go drive to a campsite with your friends, right?
yeah,
And so I think it's very kind of like just inclusive and open for
yeah,
the most part, and it's
absolutely.
kind of easy to get into, and so like you don't really have to like worry about thrashing your vehicle so much. So I think it's just like
No,
I think that all kind of led into what made that popular.
I
Um,
agree.
but
Combine like the zeitgeist, because like also camping culture, right? Like, and let's be honest, I would kill for an overlanding rig. I love overlanding, but it
yeah,
is bougie camping,
it is
right?
bougie camping for
It's
sure,
bougie camping, and
especially with like some of the gear gets
oh
just
yeah,
ridiculous.
and like REI, right, like exploded in popularity like in that like late 2010s,
Yeah, I'd
and
say
that
like
is bougie
15
camp
beyond.
central.
Yeah.
Yeah, bougie camp central, which I'm not gonna lie, right? I'm a mid-30s white guy. I make decent money. I appreciate me some bougie
I know
camping.
there's some Patagonia in your closet.
There's none. There's none. I have Land's End, but I do have an REI tent. So I definitely
There's some Patagonia in your future or some Arcteryx or something. I
no,
can smell it.
no, no.
But yeah, no.
But
So
yeah,
I think
I
that
would agree with that. That is a big, big change. Like thing I
yeah,
did not expect to see. Um, yeah, you know, one of the other ones that really like I think drove like was surprising to me. Um, 2008 to like 20, I don't know, 14, right? And for me, because like I didn't get into cars until I was a little older. Um, but growing up, I remember boosted Civics, boosted VWs, right? Like I remember built front wheel drive cars were absolutely a thing,
oh, 100
right?
percent.
Yeah, of course you still had the JDM scene, you still had like the S chassis, you still had the American guys, right? Euro BMW still a huge thing, but like it wasn't a joke to have a built front wheel drive car. And I feel like you don't see that anywhere anymore. Like not from the manufacturers, but not like I don't see it anywhere, right? And I think it has something to do with drift culture being like kind of
The new
the
hot
new
segment
thing.
in town. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
So yeah, so obviously growing up, I grew up a Honda boy. My dad tuned to build Hondas as I grew up, so like
yeah,
I was just surrounded by that. So I saw a lot of that, and I definitely thought like even myself, right? Like I definitely thought there, and I've had Civics, but I definitely thought at one point, like that was going to be like the staple of my garage, right? And so I
yeah,
definitely did move into other things um, from that point. But
yeah,
there definitely was way more, and like even just like on the market as far as like what's available now, like there are no more like really like front wheel drive like hot hatch things. Like you can go buy a Civic
no,
Type R or like a Civic Si right now, or like a GTI, but like that's kind of it.
yeah.
Like
Or what I chose, my what
yeah,
I still
yes,
contend that it's the single best deal you can get on a sporty car today is an F56 Mini Cooper S. But you know,
it's
yeah.
definitely a great option
But you don't see
for the
people
value.
tuning them,
No,
right?
not
Nobody's
really.
building a Cooper. Nobody's really building a GTI. Nobody like, and I think I hadn't thought about it when you said it before, but I think you might be right. Like, there's not of how do I say this right? Like the small front wheel drive cars. I think from the last 10 to 15 years haven't been that good to actually be something to build a platform off of.
Yeah,
And the ones you mentioned, like there's a couple tuner-ish front-wheel drive
yeah.
cars.
Like I would say like the Type R's, that we've gotten
Yeah,
here in the states. Like I feel like those have been pretty popular. I feel like the GTI has always been relatively popular. But like you still have small, like there's still smaller subset communities in comparison to like the Subaru scene, right? Or
Yeah.
the guys that are building Mustangs or vets or drift culture is at its entirety, right? Because there's all kinds of stuff that's kind of all intermingled there.
I've been really surprised with how much like it's the American scene, right? Like the American kind of sports car, muscle car scene has gained so much dominance in motorsport outside of like growing up, right? Because you had like S197 Mustang was kind of it kind of had a decent chassis to it. SN95 was a joke largely in the community. People built them, they built them for drag. That was it.
Yeah.
You didn't have people building track
Well, and even
Mustangs,
I think
track Camaros.
there's kind of been, yeah, because I mean honestly during the SM95 New Edge era for drag racing, like that is where the fourth gen Camaro kind of just really like took off and started to gain
Yeah.
a really strong foothold.
Yeah.
Because if you were a Ford guy, you were probably just staying with a Fox body. Like there wasn't too much of a reason
No.
to go into a New Edge platform unless you were looking at something like a Terminator.
Yeah, or like a Cobra, right? Like Cobras.
Exactly.
I knew a guy in college that had a Cobra, and he still tracks that thing, right? Like that was a legitimately good like track car, but that's really low production volume. That's like being like, yeah, it's absolutely worth getting an S550 if it's a GT350.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
and so like I do think too, like nowadays because of how cheap an SN95 or a New Edge is, like they
Yeah.
can you like using aftermarket stuff, you can turn them into a lot of fun for not a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
Because broke boys have destroyed all the drift missiles.
yeah, exactly. So like yeah, we're
There's
at the
nothing
point where
left.
we're discovering new missiles. But yeah,
What
so
can
like,
I build with? It's all gone. It's all crap.
well yeah, because now you're paying 10 grand for Miatas and 3 Series, and it's like
And like 20 grand for an S chassis that's automatic and stock, and you're like,
yeah, it's like
what is going on?
so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like definitely, the muscle car platforms have definitely like grown a lot in popularity that they didn't really have. But I think it's also because they kind of in like the early 2000s, right, or like the early 2000s to like early 20 teens, we were definitely leading into like away from like that overall muscle car, like the old
Yeah.
school muscle car like tone. Because like now, if you look like the GT500, the GT350, you look at even like the Camaros, like
Yeah.
the
The Alpha
ZL1,
Platform Camaro.
yeah, that's all like it's a lot more track focused than
They're
they've ever been before.
they're great. They're
Oh yeah,
so good. Like they're better than what other like people like largely 90s JDM cars, right? Like you step into a modern American muscle car and it is leagues better
oh yeah,
than
like
the exonerate like or the deified like 90s JDM stuff.
oh yeah, like I mean, you can't even contest like if you put I mean, obviously, if you take stuff from the '90s and compare it to stuff, now,
Yeah, the new
it's
stuff's gonna be better,
it's
right?
it's really hard to like genuinely compare those back to back. But I mean, like it's really hard to justify going and spending 40 grand on a relatively clean FDRX7 when you could spend that same 40 grand and just go buy a GT350. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot of car for 40 grand in comparison to an FDRX7, and like a GT350 does everything better. It just does.
Yeah.
So, like, for somebody who's wanting to get into that, I could definitely see why you might not want to spend 40 grand buying either one of those older cars like that, or even just buying a Golf, like a high trim GTI or an FL5, for instance. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at spending the money you'd already spend to buy a GT350, and so I feel like
That's
lot
a
of
good
people,
point too. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people just kind of take that and they're looking at, like, well, do I really want, if I'm going to spend the money to buy a fun car, right? If I'm going to buy this, like, because I want some kind of visceral sports car experience, it's kind of really hard to choose the FL5
Yeah.
over this unless you're in a situation where, like, I can only have a single car. So I think for a lot of people, like, who aren't in that situation where it's like, oh, well, like my wife has, a full size SUV. Like that's how we get the kids around, and like I just drive back and forth to work 2 or 3 days a week, and I
That's
want to
me.
buy something nice. Like 100%, you could just go and buy a GT350, and like it kind of like it doesn't hurt you that it only gets 12 to 15 mpg because you only drive it 3 days a week to work. You know,
Yeah.
like it's definitely a semi practical, and like a GT350 is honestly so good. Like you could pretty much daily drive it. Like unless you're dealing with snow, you could daily drive it. You could drive it every day. It's not
Yeah.
going to be a problem for it. So
No.
like I think that's another thing that's changed over the course of like cars that used to be like a Civic used to be that super reliable, super good, and like
Yeah.
in the 2000s, right? You saw them everywhere, and I feel like they kind of in the 80s and 90s, front wheel drive cars were kind of a joke, and
Yeah.
then you got to this point like in the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, where they stopped being a joke and they did prove themselves. I
Yeah.
mean, you had people really running out like the Eclipses, the Civics, and the
Oh
other things
yeah.
like that. But you just like you said, you don't see those anymore. Like nobody's. I actually just saw like an absolutely ratted turbo EM1 on the freeway the other day.
Hmm.
But I was like excited when I saw it because I was just
Yeah.
like, dang, I was like, I ain't seen somebody just like doing old school Honda shit in a minute.
Well, I
So
mean, look back at the first Fast and the Furious, right? Like, this is the car movie, right? This
yeah,
is like the car movie that starts car movies. And you've got Eclipse, you've got a Jetta,
yeah,
right? Like, like just straight up VW Jetta. Like, that's traffic.
yeah,
You go see one
100%.
of those on the road today, that's traffic. Unless you are in one of like the small weird enclaves of VW enthusiasts, you don't see those modified very often, but you used to. Right? I remember like for me, right, I kind of got into one scene, and then when I really started getting into cars, like I got into the VW scene.
Mhm.
So as everybody's running around Mark II, Mark III, Mark I, right, Golfs and Jettas and VR6 swap, 1.8T swap. Sometimes it was like, man, I just want a cool car. I'm going to run it low, and I'm going to put a 2-liter ABA, the 2-point slow, right? And they just make these things, and then you just build them up a little bit, and you can maybe find something crazy, and it's fun. But people are just building these things. That attitude, I don't think, is there anymore because the standard for like what is a build or what is worth building has shifted. And that was actually, I think, getting to another point you made
Yes.
earlier about stuff that's changed, which is, I think, what is the standard for a build and the standards of builds.
Yeah, so I think, and like that's a good way of putting it too. Is like, you would do like a swap or something like that. But a lot of builds, in the 2000s, I remember like being a kid, right, and my dad working in the shop, like you didn't really see like people come in and just like do like an entire build in like one go. Like that wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
Where like nowadays, I feel like you see people like they pop out with a new car on Instagram. 6 weeks later, it's unrecognizable from the
Right.
I got this new car post, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's wrapped, it's got a body kit on, it's got wheels, it's got all this stuff. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, you just bought that Supra 6 weeks ago. How the hell did
Right.
you get all this done to it, right? So and so
Right.
like, I think that
Check
yeah,
out
like,
my sponsors.
yeah, like I think like the influencer scene has definitely played a big role
Yeah.
because obviously those people have like deadlines, right? Like you can't
Yeah.
sit on the same project forever. You need to be able to churn that content and get that out on YouTube. Same way.
And nobody
Um,
wants to watch a slow build. They
no,
want
of course,
to be
because
like, oh, look at the super cool car.
no, exactly. Well, and like, let's be real. If you're the car guy, right, and you're watching YouTube, you don't want to sit there and have the car in
No.
your driveway on jack stands that you can't afford to build just so you hop on YouTube and watch 40 other people make a video of the
Not
one
really.
thing they could afford to do to their car that month, right? Because like
No.
that's boring content, right?
It's
Nobody's
not fun. Yeah. The
Yeah.
only time I watch a video like that is it's like how to change an Audi Q7 water pump.
yeah, exactly. So like watching content like that, nobody's gonna stick around to watch it because
No.
they could just go stand outside in their driveway and experience waiting to put the next thing on, right? So like it kind of doesn't make sense. Whereas like you could go pull up Adam LZ and he's gonna give you 30 minutes of like working on 5 different cars and you're like, oh man, like I wish I could do this. I want to do this so bad. And you're
Yes.
just meanwhile like you don't realize he just spent 30 grand to work on those 5 cars in that
For
in
real.
that one
Yeah.
video. But like that's the reality of it, right? And
Yep.
granted, I mean the sponsors and other stuff is involved there. But back in the day, it was like, okay, like I'm I'm gonna save up. I'm gonna get this exhaust. I'm gonna throw it down. I'm gonna get these wheels. And I'm gonna do some low ring springs and shocks right now because that's what I can afford to do. And so like you kind of piece things together. And I feel like people, to be honest, kind of had a lot better of an idea of a direction of what they were doing because you change one or two things and then you drive it around and like so you'd be like, okay, well I put this on and I'm still getting body roll. I don't want this body roll. You're like I want this. I think this could be firmer. So now you're gonna switch to the next mod you do is picking up them sway bars and stuff like that. Whereas like before, that's how that went. Now you see people, and they're just like, yeah, guys, today we're putting new suspension on, insert whatever car here, and then it's like a whole Wise Fab kit. It's
Yeah.
tubular subframes and everything all at once. It's like you can't really see the differences between how the
No.
car behaves when you change that much stuff at once.
Absolutely. You're doing too much stuff. It used to be that I think maybe this is part of it, not like right the YouTubeification, but it's also it used to be someone would have a car, right? They'd build it, and then for it to be seen, it's got to go through to shows, right? Whether it's like Slammed Enough or for me it's right like Werthersee or other VW shows. And you'd see that car, and then next year he'd be back, and it would have a different body kit, or he might have changed up the stance. It's got new wheels, like he did a little bit of engine work. And that car, you saw that evolution, but you saw that evolution like once a year, once every couple years,
and
right?
now you're seeing it.
It's immediate.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to, because I'm automotive engineer. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I remember it was back when the Ranger, I think it was coming out, and I was working at Ford, and we went to the auto show, like the Detroit Auto Show, the one that you would think they would show the car because we knew it was coming out soon.
Yeah.
No Ranger. There's no Ranger there. And then we get back, and it was like a week later, it was a YouTube clip. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, but people don't care because there's a infinitesimal percent of the population that's actually going to go to that show, and everybody has easy access on YouTube.
Yeah. Well,
so the build is for YouTube, not so much that people are going to come see it. That's a very small subset, and that's right. So now you have this immense pressure. You're not doing it over time, and then the quality of what you're doing is dropping because you have no time to figure out what it needs. You're just
doing
it all in
throwing the
one
next
go.
thing at it.
Yeah. And then get the car out, sell it, give it a giveaway, right? And then gone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and actually, I think that can kind of lead into something we talked about the other day, where, why people are kind of narrowing in on what you'd probably consider like a good platform, right?
Yes.
Because like, I feel like you hear a lot about like cookie cutter builds, right? And so like just as an example, like you kind of hear about like people all the time where like they'll go buy an S550 and you could just do like you go buy a Gen 2 Coyote S550 and drop a blower on it, do a fuel system, throw some suspension tires at it, and like that's a car you're just running like you're good for tens all day.
Throw the Roush kit on, throw the honestly I don't know Mustangs enough, but like whatever the insert other major
I mean there's like half a dozen kits,
right?
There's a half a dozen kits for blowers and like there's like 5 guys that make practically drop in fuel systems. You just buy all this stuff, you just click add to cart, we're gonna ship it to your door, you can install it, you call Lund, you're running tens, and like it's honestly pretty much that easy to do that,
which is cool.
Yes,
but then if somebody wants to go build something stupid then you get all the comments of, oh, it's not worth it. You should just, I'm sure we've all heard this one, right? You have a car, you're young. It's a cool car, but it's automatic. And you go, I want to manual swap this. And every freaking person is going to be in your ear going, you should have just bought a manual car. Screw you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's, everyone now is just like, hey, if it's not the most cost-efficient way, if it's not the coolest way, if it's not the easiest way, if you didn't buy the right platform, if you didn't do this, you didn't do that, what's the point? Because it's just like armchair quarterbacking on whether it's worth it to build something or not. I was thinking about that with the front-wheel drive stuff.
Yeah.
Why would you build a Focus if you could just go buy a Focus ST? Why would you build a Focus ST if you could just go buy an RS? Why? Not for the love of the game, because it's not about the love of the game anymore. It's about the number. It's about what it does.
Well, and I think that for a lot of people we've come to a point where a lot of people can't recognize whether or not they're building a car for themselves or if they're building a car for clout at this point anymore.
Yes.
So I think that definitely plays a good role into it. Now, a little bit of devil's advocate here, because I'll be honest.
I think it's fair.
I am kind of a get a good platform kind of pusher, right? But my reasoning for that is I myself have been guilty of this. And I've had plenty, I can't tell you how many times I've had customers, or potential customers, I guess I should say, that come to me with something, right? And they're like, yeah, hey, I've got, it's this 2000s Volvo wagon. And they're like, I want to take this and insert a goal here, right? Like they're like, I want to run a 9 in it, or I want to make 1,000 horsepower, or I want to do this. And
yeah,
a lot of these people really don't realize that, like, to do a legitimate build, to do something that, like, how I used to do at a previous shop that I ran, like actually doing like a resto, for instance, right? So like to do like a fully built, all new suspension, ground up, bodywork, framework, like everything, all the way to turnkey in like a 60s Camaro, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were like, our customers were invoicing out at like well over six figure, like this is $150,000, for these, being invoiced
the
here.
Moment you have to do anything that requires custom fabrication.
Exactly. And like it gets
costs quadruple,
right.
It's quintuple, right? You're
and
way
the
up.
thing that a lot of these guys don't realize is like, dude, your 2003, random regular traffic Volvo that you might hold, dear because it was your first car and it was given to you by grandma and stuff like that. Like, yes, I understand the vision of wanting to make it cool. I've had plenty of silly little shit that I would love to like own again and try to do all the things that I didn't have the capacity to do back in the day.
Oh yeah.
But when you start looking at it, it's like, okay, well, if, like, nobody makes a swap kit for this. Like, the thing is, like, an FRS is easy to LS swap because you could just go and buy a kit. And, like, you've got expensive quality kits and good quality kits, like stuff like from Sicky or some of these other guys. And, like, they're expensive. But, like, because that product exists, somebody else came along and was like, hey, I can make this cheaper. I can give you just the motor mounts. I can come up with a cheaper way to do this. And so now, like, you could practically throw an LS inside of, like, a ZN6 chassis for next to nothing. Whereas, like, you're not doing that in, a lot of other chassis. Like, but the thing is, a ZN6 is a well-supported chassis. There's a reason why it's a well-supported chassis, and it's because it's an overall good platform. Whether you buy it stock and do stuff with it, and that's how a lot of people are going to be, right? They're going to buy that stock ZN6.
Yeah.
They're going to build on it for a while. They're going to want more, and then they're going to upgrade it. But there's a lot of potential in that chassis. Whereas, like, unfortunately, there's not a lot of potential in your Escort. There's not a lot of potential in your base Focus. And so, as much as I hate to be like you really should just go do this guy, because, I've had the same dreams, I've wanted to do, silly stuff. But, like, there comes a point where, like, if you don't really have the tools, the equipment, or the capacity to do that kind of stuff, if you need a daily driver that's reliable, go buy the Mustang. If your goal is I want to make 800 horse and be able to run low 10s, just go buy that S550, because you could do all that and you're not going to have to worry about blowing that thing up, constantly. Whereas, like, if you're trying to run a Focus RS
built,
to run,
if you want like a fully built, whatever, like we said, the Volvo wagon.
Yeah.
That thing's not going to be reliable. It's going to need rebuilds constantly if you want it to have that performance. And I think that's part of it for me is there are people who know better, right? Like you.
Yeah.
Who know this is impractical. It's ridiculous. Like, look, dude, if this is your goal, that is really, really going to be hard to achieve. And I think that it's a completely valid thing to say.
100%.
It's like, dude, this is going to cost you a crap load of money. But you have the armchair quarterbacks, the young kids who go, hey, look, well, Adam LZ says that this is a stupid platform to build on.
Yeah.
So, and then they regurgitate it. And then the moment anybody tries to do anything that's remotely difficult, you just get the response. Like, they just give the response of, well, you should have just bought a manual. And that's something I just see, and I felt so much more recently. Because I remember, like, younger, you'd have somebody come in, and they've got like a VW like Golf or whatever, and they're like, I want to build this up, and I want to do this. I want a VR6 swap, and I want to do a full interior from blah 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 blah. And everybody around him is like, yeah, like let's do it. Let's go to the junkyard. Let's do the pick and pull. Let's build this thing. We'll do it. We'll wire it up. Everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. And now the attitude is, that's too much work. Why would you do that? Why aren't you shooting for the hyper performance? Why don't you just get the car that runs the night? Like, and I think that's the part that's missing for me, is for some people, I think it's the love of the game is gone. It's
Definitely.
like you said, the clout.
Yeah, I think, well, and because let's be real, at this point, clout is a currency
It is.
in and of itself. So, like, I do kind of understand that. And I do understand, too, like, people who have been in the game, especially, like, like we're talking about, the early 20 teens, like being in high school and, doing, being involved in cars, at that point versus in comparison to being in cars, 10, 15 years later, and seeing, like kind of how things are and where things are at. And like you said, like, there's a lot of people that aren't really about it anymore. Like, they're not in the junkyards. They're not doing this stuff. They're not, bullshitting, with their boys in the garage,
No.
just drinking a couple of beers and, hanging out and, trying to figure out something. A lot of people are just like kind of throwing stuff together willy-nilly because like they're trying to do something that like they can make their next TikTok video on, or they can, because everybody's kind of in that point where like we all want to be, some level of influencer or some level of, there's a lot of pressure, I feel like, for a lot of people.
How are you going to fund it?
Right.
Because it's gotten so expensive.
Exactly.
Something...
I don't think that even modifying a car has really gotten that much more expensive. I think a lot of people have actually, like, honestly, I would say it's probably cheaper to modify a car. Like, the performance to dollar ratio's never been better than right now.
That's a fair point, yeah.
But I think what a lot of people have, like, really missed is just, like, how much the actual cost of a build really is. And to, like, actually build something proper. Because I see a lot of times, like, I know you've definitely pulled up Facebook Marketplace or something. You've searched something, you've been scrolling around, look, you see something you think's kind of cool, and then you're like, oh, this dude just built this. Like, it's only got 6,000 miles on the motor, and it's got all these parts. Why would he want to get rid of it? And it's probably because he spent a bunch of money, he's financed to debt, to hell in it, and you can't afford to actually like really do much to it anymore. And so now you got to get out of it, or even if you can afford it, you just threw a bunch of stuff at it, you really didn't know what it needed, and now you're like, I don't really like this thing, like it kind of sucks.
Yeah, right. And we talk about our buddy Jordan from Shipbox Garage, right? His IS300, he built it. He's like, this engine's capable of 1,000 horsepower. It's built out to be able to handle 1,000 horsepower. He said, I don't want 1,000 horsepower car. I want a 600 horsepower car because it almost never breaks, and it's not bad to drive, and it doesn't die at freaking idle, right?
Exactly. And I mean, like, an IS300 is a fairly short wheelbase. Like, it's like, that's not really, like, that chassis was never intended to have 4 or 5 times the power it originally came with, you know?
Which is why his is on drag slicks, but...
Yeah, exactly.
And actually that gets to, I think kind of the last point I wanted to make on this, because we've had, like, it was like, complain about stuff, so I wanted to make it a nice one. I actually really think it's nice that stuff like AC and power steering and keeping features in cars and making sure these builds are livable is becoming a bit more common, right?
Yeah,
like, what did you do if you had a Honda in the 90s? Power steering delete, AC delete. You gutted all this stuff.
Yeah,
trimmed bays. I haven't seen a trimmed bay, like a shaved bay, in forever.
Yeah, honestly. And you know what's funny? Now, I used to kind of be like, why would you do that? Like, why would you waste all that time doing that? But now whenever I see pictures of, like, shaved bays, I'm like, oh, man, that looks so good. Like,
But then
like
you think about living with it, and you're
yeah,
like, oh, fuck that, man.
yeah, exactly. But no, and that is a very good point. And I think I've got two kind of
I'm curious what your
reasons
thoughts are.
why I think this kind of become a thing. One,
Mhm.
obviously, people have gotten kind of spoiled with new car features.
Oh god, they're so good.
So
They're
like
so good.
new cars are so much better than stuff from the
It's
90s.
so
Like
good.
whenever I drive some like the old cars, I'm just like, oh my god, man. Like
Yeah.
just give me like a good sounding radio. Like this sound,
Yeah.
like the speakers in here suck.
I want a real radio, blowers that work. I want to be able to hear myself when I'm talking driving down the
Well, like
highway.
especially across like newer builds, right? Like nobody's
Oh
really
yeah.
depowering a steering rack anymore, deleting
No.
power steering because like you've got electric power steering now, and like
Yeah, it doesn't
something
suck
like
from
and
the
something
power.
like the FRS, like it's actually good. Like
Yeah.
the FRS electric rack is fantastic.
Yeah,
So
I think that's another. That's true. Yeah, the electric versus hydraulic because
so like now
older
it's
cars
not
were
sapping
hydraulic.
power. You
Yeah,
know, it's not something that's because a lot of people would also delete it. It was in the way, right? You're trying to fit that big turbo, but you got these
that's a good
stupid
point.
power
Yeah,
steering
yeah,
lines in the way. You know, so like
right.
I think for a lot of people, it was just like, okay, well now that this is out of the way, it's not really concerning, and I can
Yeah,
have power steering still. So like
yep.
this is great. And same thing, like even in the aftermarket world, especially in resto mod stuff, there's kind
Yeah,
of been a big push to
I
actually
love resto mods.
add AC
Yeah,
and like heat back into vehicles that never really had those features.
I'm sure you've seen the super high end like Bronco resto mods that people do where like they've
Yep.
got the crank windows, like the crank window handles, but then it's like you push it up, power windows, push
Yep.
it down, power like they're keeping the aesthetics, but they're putting in all the features again, and those things go for money.
Oh,
Oh
absolutely
my
they do.
god.
Because everybody wants the nostalgia of like and like
Yeah.
this is why I kind of loved so like I'll be honest like I didn't really care at all about 60s like stuff
No.
almost at all before I started actually like working on it
No.
when we were doing resto mods and stuff. But so like I drove a couple of like mostly stock 60s Camaros. They're dog shit. Like
They're so
they
bad.
suck in comparison to anything,
I mean,
nowadays.
even a
But
Fox body, which is an 80s car, is not very good,
no,
right?
not
As
at
far
all.
as cars go.
But in comparison to like I can understand like they do have offer an experience that like is
Yes.
kind of it's different like it doesn't
Yes.
compare to the new stuff and so like I think that's what gets people excited about it. There's the nostalgia behind it, especially like if you grew up and like your first car was a Fox body. I could totally understand
I
how
still
like
want
getting
one.
in a Fox body is like man like it's just,
I've driven
like
one Fox body and I still kind of want one. So,
so
yeah.
speaking on Fox bodies, I actually
Yeah.
I didn't get it for a while and I'd driven
Mhm.
probably about like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
One day, my former boss, he had a 93 Cobra with like 30,000 original miles on it. Just beautiful
So
car.
like properly maintained, the
Yeah.
suspension was still there, the bushings were tight, right?
Yeah, like everything is still good
Yeah,
on this
yeah,
car.
yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
fantastic. And if he ever wants to sell that car, I need him to call me first because that car is honestly what made me kind of fall in love with Fox bodies because I drove it and I was like, I get it. I get what all these guys were going on about because that car
Right.
really felt like an American 240 at that point. But
Seriously, people, refresh your bushings.
yes,
Screw your coilovers, screw your extra power. The first thing you need to do with an old car is go and rip apart the entire suspension and redo every bushing. And while you're down there, do your fuel lines.
yes,
Yes. Sorry.
yes.
I digress.
Maintenance over modification.
Yes.
Maintenance over modification every
Yes.
time.
You wouldn't
Every
slap
time.
a coat of paint over a moldy wall. Come on, people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I think now that you have like access to a lot of this stuff, like where they're adding this kind of stuff back, like for instance, like Vintage Air is a really cool company
I've
that
not heard of
makes
that. Okay.
they make like compressor kits and like interior kits to like actually route stuff.
That's
So you can
cool.
actually have like your like, AC set up in like a 60s Camaro. So like
That's cool.
I've installed a few of those and like
Yeah.
it's really cool that you can add something like that to those vehicles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because it makes people want to continue to keep them alive and keep saving them and do that restoration.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I'm kind of excited to see like what is that era of cars going to look like in another 20 or 30 years when we can actually take a lot of like the current stuff. Like imagine you could
Mhm.
add like these advanced traction control systems and stuff to some of
Yeah.
these older vehicles and like things like that. And I think that'll be really interesting to
Well,
see. Like,
and that's
or EV
and that's
swaps
kind of
and stuff.
becoming part, right, with like, because one of the big things SEMA's been dealing with recently, right? Because for people that don't know, SEMA is without a doubt one of the largest, if not the largest, influences on regulatory policy in favor of us car guys, right? For like modification and things like that. And one of the big things they've been dealing with is, I think it's NHTSA trying to push, no modification that you're making to the car can affect things like automatic emergency braking. And that was actually just brought up in a like professional meeting I had with an OEM. Is, like as a tire company, we have to make sure that like, hey, we want to resource tires to you guys, or we want to switch tires to you guys, but you got to meet these ridiculous grip targets, because everybody has to meet these ridiculous grip targets. And the question we had was like, well, what about aftermarket tires? How do you manage that? Like, can I not switch my freaking tires? Yeah. And they're going for companies like suspension companies, and if you make like a cowl modification, right? And they've got the sensor that does AB in the cowl, or right anywhere on the front of the car, and you make a modification to that and you delete it. Well, it's not compliant. And that's the same thing that like diesel tuners and engine tuners or stuff are going at, right? They make a change to the engine, and the EPA comes after them and says like, hey, by the way, you changed the emissions. You're on our shit list now.
Exactly. And this actually kind of brings back to like that truck overlanding talking point where we were talking about like the ease of modability, and right, and that it didn't actually destroy a lot of features, but that could even ruin that, where like you can't put a 2 or 3 inch lift on your vehicle, because like if you do that, you might have to entirely recalibrate your ADAS system if you can even keep it. So doing stuff like that, like, is that gonna like, are they gonna be able to keep systems like that compliant? And like that's gonna raise costs. Like, you're not gonna have an $800 rough country kit anymore. You're probably only gonna have a $4,000 setup from Icon that has a module that recalibrates, this for those height settings or something. And
there was a James Pumphrey video actually that he like just did talking about the reason why he has this like mid 2000s G-Wagon and not a brand new G-Wagon, because he's like, I want to put new suspension. I put new suspension. I want to put a new radio. I'd use a double din. I want to put a new suspension on this G-Wagon. I got to go take it to the dealer, and then they got to do a whole recalibration on all of my systems, and my ESC doesn't work, and it's fucking flashing lights everywhere, and everything's not working. And and that's new cars.
Well, and do you want to spend 6 figures on a new G-Wagon to have those types of problems, right? Like, you don't want lights on the dash for something you're paying probably $1,500 a month for, or I mean, but whatever then, you might be paying, right? So,
I think down 2035, right? And now that's a 10-year-old car. Can I touch it?
Yeah.
What am I going to be able to do to it? I don't know.
Yeah, because
right.
When you're the guy buying it for 40 grand or 60 grand, like, are you going to face those same problems?
And can you do anything about it? We've got companies like OBD11, like because for the longest time, I'm a VW guy. I'm now kind of an Audi guy. I'm growing into BMWs a little bit. For the longest time, if you had an Audi or you were working on like a newer VW, you had to get VCDS, because for the Volkswagen diagnostic systems, you have to have it. Now we got a company like OBD11 that's made it way easier and way cheaper.
Yeah.
And they kind of commodified it and made it simple. Are we going to see that for everybody else, or are we going to have to see that? Like, is it really going to become a prerequisite to work on your car in any way, to make modifications of your car in any way? You're going to have to like partner with these companies, probably. That's kind of the way I see it going.
Well, and I mean, like, we've kind of already had this issue for about the last decade or so in different segments for engine stuff, where like ECMs are locked, and I mean, it used to take just a little bit of time to get into stuff, but I mean, like, it was a good while before people like managed to get into the ECM for like the C8s, or even now, like S650 Mustangs or Gen 4 Coyote stuff, you can't touch it at all. It's all locked right now.
Yeah,
and it's been locked since it released. So
isn't Lexus, like even old Lexus and old Toyota, like it's like, isn't that stuff like still pretty much impossible to get into?
I think there's a good amount of stuff that's still like kind of a pain in the ass. I think like it got really difficult like post 2020, 2022.
I believe that.
But like there's definitely like there's still some like workarounds to some things. But I mean like even if you go through like just as an example, just because I'm familiar with it,
Yeah.
like Mustangs. I mean there's like 5 or 6 different ECM like setups like or set of instructions really
Yeah.
between like 2015 and 2024. So like
Yeah.
like they're constantly changing that. Like they don't want you to be in
No,
it. And I'm assuming that is all for regulatory purposes because they're like,
I'm
okay, like
sure.
we tried to,
Or just general security,
we
right? Like,
tried to make sure they didn't mess with it, but they figured us out. Uh,
well, in cloud connectivity too, right? Like all these
yeah,
ECMs connecting to the BCM, connecting to the actual modules that are transmitting up to.
exactly. Well, and
Um,
of course,
it's a
you
network
kind of do
security
want
thing.
this. You yeah, because anything that's connected to the internet has information, right? And so like
Yep.
a lot of these cars they have navigation. They know where they're
Yeah.
at. So like
Yeah.
if somebody else could get into that, they could definitely just find out where you are. The wrong person with the wrong intentions or the right
Yeah.
person with the wrong intentions here, could definitely cause harm. And we've actually even seen examples of that. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean,
Which
like,
this
there's
is going to drive costs up,
100%.
obviously, because it's going to make it harder to get into. It's going to make it harder to modify. And I think that got to probably, I know, one of the last points we wanted to touch on here, which
Yeah.
is how buy now, pay later financing affected the aftermarket.
Yeah.
And
So
I know there's more that you had there in that, but I think that this is definitely like looking at the future. We've already seen a significant shift to
yes.
I can't afford this stuff, so I'm just going to buy it on financing. Klarna eating a burrito kind of joke, but it's a real thing.
Yeah. No,
And
100% it is.
if the costs can just keep going up, they can, right? Because people will continue to pay it and they can just keep financing it, then fine. Maybe these things do have a future in being able to actually be done because we can just finance it. But I don't really want that. But I know you had thoughts on like how buy now pay later financing has affected things, and I'm curious, like
Yeah.
since you're more on the aftermarket side than I am.
So even just one, I mean, just from like the customer perspective, I actually probably can't tell you how many times I was told like, oh, like do you offer a firm? Like if you offered a firm, I would buy from you right now. And it's like, I mean, you probably shouldn't be using that as the only prerequisite to making your purchase.
No.
Like there should probably be a little bit more thought into it that, like, is this what I need right now? Or like, oh, I've been saving for this. And like, yeah, okay, like I know this is what I want. I know
Right.
this is what I need. But like I've been asked plenty of times, like, hey, like I want to buy this. Like, do you have a firm? Do you have, PayPal and Forward, things like that. And I did have the option of setting that up at
Yeah,
one point.
what's
when I was
the
doing-
actual like I want to know like as a vendor, what is that like? Cuz I've never sold.
So
right?
there's one as a vendor, like they charge the vendor a fee to offer that. So
I'm
like
sure.
if somebody affirms, I lose a cut of that.
Yeah.
In order
How
for
much is
somebody
it about?
It depends. It's a
Okay.
percentage of the purchase. I don't remember offhand
What the
'cause it's been a
number
while.
exactly. But then like you kind of have to raise prices on everything,
Right.
or you have to just bake it into your operating margins.
Exactly. And so, like, with that, like, obviously, you kind of don't want to do that, right? Because now all the people who normally just buy stuff like normal,
Yeah.
like, they're going to see a cost increase.
Yep.
And, like, not that I even have a problem with people using services like this, but, I mean, some data came out relatively recently that, like, Klarna has, like,
Oh, they're
over
just
100
losing
million
it.
users. And, like,
Yeah.
they have so much money out right now. Like,
So much loss.
they're just taking loss month after month.
Yeah.
And so like clearly that was not, that grew too big too fast. They were probably doing way too much subprime lending
Yeah.
to get themselves
Which
in that
is-
position.
I mean, let's be honest, right? Like that's what their whole shtick was, is we're the subprime like
Yeah.
finance
Oh,
your
100%.
DoorDash company.
Because let's be real, if you had the ability, if you needed that set of wheels and tires to get on your car and you had good credit, and you'd probably just put on a credit card, right? Like the feeling, and like I'm sure I was an idiot at one point too. My first my first Subaru stuff. I did just max out the credit cards to buy a bunch of parts. And like,
Yeah.
my first attempt at trying to make YouTube videos, I went credit card swiped up a bunch of, so like I was guilty of, just swiping the card and getting myself into a hole.
Sorry, it reminded me one thing. Is layaway still a thing? Because I
don't
remember
think
when
it
I
is.
was a kid.
Yes, Kmart offered layaway.
Yeah, like when my parents would put the toys for Christmas on layaway because we didn't have a lot of money.
Yep.
And I kind of remember that, and I was like, that just completely felt like, I don't know if that fell out of my consciousness because I'm not broke. I don't mean, I'm not saying that in like a mean way, right?
Yeah,
but like it's
no,
true,
yeah.
right? I don't have to.
Yeah.
Or is it really just like, people don't do it anymore, like maybe because of credit card prevalence and stuff like that. I don't know.
And I think it's kind of more that. I think people just kind of was like, okay, well, why would I put it on layaway when I could just buy with the card? I have it right now, and I'll just pay it off later.
Because
like,
credit cards, I think, kind of grew in relevance like in the 90s and
yeah,
2000s.
for sure.
It reminds me, did you ever watch, have you ever seen Good Will Hunting, I assume?
I think so. I can't recall it.
It reminded me because there's a scene where like the dude, like he can't afford his like $1.30 like burger.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben Affleck's character is like, I'm gonna put this on layaway, and like throws it up on the dash. And he's like, you're gonna pay me 4 cents a week for the next like, you're gonna have half down now and 4 cents a week for the next 3 weeks, and I'll keep it right here, and then you can have your burger. And it just, I don't know, it reminded me like that
that's
because
hilarious.
it's like, how would we finance stuff? Like financing things we can't really afford has just been the human nature, like
and
forever.
It's really become like the norm, I feel like, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that is where I think we've kind of entered a problem, and I feel like this kind of comes in tandem with that social media presence we were talking about, or that pressure, right? Because like obviously all these people want to build their cars, and so now you have a bunch of people, almost all of these part sites, so you could probably pull up 90% of them. They offer this stuff. They offer Klarna, they offer Affirm, they offer some form of subprime
buy now,
lending,
pay
like
later.
buy now, pay later thing.
Yeah.
And so people are just affirming everything, right? And a lot of people are just doing this where you're getting that. For some people it might work, and that's cool if it works for you and you can do that and it's appropriate to your finances.
But everybody's a credit card person, but some people are.
Right, exactly.
And it's the same people that'll be able to do it.
Exactly. And so like if it works for you in your situation, I'm not telling I don't think the service shouldn't exist. I think the service has good
of course
intentions,
it should.
But it's misused by a lot of people, and like unfortunately the people that misuse it don't realize that like you're the product in this scenario. You're the one being misused because like you don't know how to use this. You're hurting yourself considerably. And I mean,
I saw
a
comment on Twitter of somebody like legitimately going like, wait, that stuff's on my credit report?
Yeah, with that new Vantage Score update, I think it's 4.0 or whatever like that. Yeah, it's gonna.
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute, my Klarna's on my credit score. It's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, dude.
You financed something, dude. You owe somebody money.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of a credit report, a credit score. But I'm just like, yeah, but like people don't know that. People don't realize that. And like, I'm not trying to be rude, right? But the demographic of car guys, there's a lot of broke car guys.
Yeah, and I mean,
not good with money.
I would definitely say, well, and because I mean, we've talked about this before. It's just like car modification itself has roots in literally like the poor people wanting to keep up, right? Like,
yeah, that
was the whole thing. Like, people started hot rodding shit because they wanted to keep up. They wanted to go fast, and they wanted to keep up, with the top shelf shit, right?
It was always started as a subculture, right? Like as an underculture. That's just what it started as. It's what it's always going to have its roots in.
Right.
Racing, unfortunately, has turned into a bougie thing. But like basic, like modding your car, which is like, I think part of why drifting has so much relevance, because it still feels that way. It still feels kind of punk.
Yeah,
right?
it still feels fresh because like outside of like Formula Drift and a couple of things, there's not really too many like more formal events of drifting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So like we haven't reached F1 levels of drifting.
Well, and there's a lot, right, where it's like a lot of series and stuff where it's still like, you don't have to have the craziest, most built car.
Yeah, a lot of grassroots stuff, Final Bow. I mean, I know
whereas,
East Coast has a bunch of stuff like Lock City.
Yeah.
Grid Life's got their drifting series and
right.
stuff like that.
And so, a lot of open drift. And then what's your cheapest like grip, right? It's probably like Spec Miata,
Yeah, and honestly, you're
which
still
is
going to be
still
15,
like
20 grand into that probably.
just for the car,
Yeah.
plus some mod, like plus all the safety equipment, right? Because
Yeah.
it's been hyper overregulated.
Yeah.
Plus just like actually the cost of going and doing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy expensive. Drift is just like show up. Do you got tires? Do you got a car that's got rear wheel drive? Right?
Yeah.
Like, do you have fuel? Cool. Like,
Yeah.
go burn it, right, dude?
Cool. Like, can we look underneath your car real quick and make sure it's not going to dump a gallon of oil on the track?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it looks good. Like, yeah. Slap it on the ass and send it out, right? So,
Right.
like,
yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think like drifting, especially, kind of had its roots in like being a cheap, fun hobby that
Yes.
somebody could get into, whereas like it was cheap to slide.
Yes.
Now
and
moving
it still is kind of cheap relatively, but like not like it was.
Yeah, like it's definitely more expensive than it was, but you're also, like if you were actually gonna run like, grid life track battle and like you're gonna run that, an entire season of that, right?
You
like,
need to have a legitimate car that's
like,
legitimately built.
Yeah, and there's a lot considerably higher cost. Like you have to
Yeah.
travel to all these, things like you go want to go
buy now, pay later
helps
allows you to
accomplish.
do that.
Yeah.
And that's cool, but also it's changing things
Exactly.
because people can just buy more stuff faster that they couldn't have afforded back before this was the norm.
And I think this kind of, with my earlier point of like the standard of builds, right, and like how things have like devolved over time into like being a lower quality build, is a lot of people are doing just that, right? They're financing up all these parts. They're just throwing everything
Yes.
on there because they're trying to appeal to their clout.
Yep.
And they want to try and grow some kind of audience online, right?
Yep.
That's most people's kind of thing
Yep.
nowadays. And so
we're here.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, in hunting for that, right, this is like become a way for a lot of these people, because like you see these people, and I'm not saying like Adam LZ or any of these YouTubers are like bad because like they're inspiring people to do this.
No,
but
they found a thing people wanted to watch and they made it. It was cool. It's still cool.
Yeah,
but where do you go from here?
I think what we have a real issue with is the fact that like now that this stuff is made, all this even that much more accessible, because a lot of people are going to look at it and be like, well, I can't afford that $1,000 set of coilovers, but I do have $350 left over every month. And so now I can make that $200 a month payment on my coilovers for the next couple of months, and I could get the coilovers today.
And then their car breaks.
And then exactly, and you end up in
they can't afford to repair it.
Cycle.
And now you're paying for coilovers on a car you can't freaking drive because you didn't do the maintenance. So
exactly. So I think issues like that are just like it obviously kind of like even just most normal financial stuff, right? They're probably going to tell you like, oh, like don't put yourself in that situation. And this is kind of just one of those things. It's like this is a hobby, and like you should spend what you can afford to spend on it. Don't overreach, because it's so easy to overreach. We hear people all the time, like, oh, cars is the most expensive hobby, and like there's stuff like
never met horse girls.
Yeah, you ever like find your friend with a boat and ask him how much he spends.
Seriously,
or plane guys.
The two best days of a boat owner's experience is the day they buy it, and the day they sell it.
Exactly.
God, I've heard that joke so many times.
Yeah, I mean, we all know what boat stands for, right? Bring on another 1,000. So I mean,
seriously.
Like, there's definitely more expensive hobbies, and like cars can be cheap if you're doing it right.
If you aren't worried about, is it the right car?
Yes.
If you aren't worried about the clout and the end of the build and doing it all at once, if you aren't worried about maximizing everything, right? If you're willing to buy maybe a cheaper front wheel drive car, like I kind of the last point on this, because we're kind of coming up on an hour here, is it reminds me, right? I'm a huge fan of Alex Martinez, right? Martini Works. I love Gels. I love Dakota, the guys on that show. Alex has been pushing that he thinks like the Scion TC is like the next best like cheap tuner car for like young dudes to buy, and I love that he's doing that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that he's
no,
doing that because they did have, if I remember correctly, they did have like Toyota TRD developed superchargers for those cars.
yep.
They had cool options, and it's just like,
It's not a bad looking car. It's
no,
relatively fun. It can be
it's
relatively
cheap.
sporty, and they're relatively cheap, and they're going to be reliable. And I
Just
think,
build it.
yeah, exactly. Well,
Just build the car.
yeah. Well,
Don't
and
worry.
beyond even that, right? I think like a lot of people kind of need to be brought back into reality of like where their own standing is,
Yeah.
because like a TC is something a lot of people can afford to build. A
Yes.
lot of people are getting into like chassis that they can't afford to build,
No.
and like there's a difference between being in a good platform and being in a platform that's like expensive, right? Like just because
Yes.
you can afford to buy a car, you might be able to afford the payment on that
But
$60,000 GTR.
not the
But like
maintenance, not the mods.
like if you're genuinely considering going and buying something like a GTR, I
Mhm.
would urge you to go and check out the cost of things that like you need to do. So like those early gen GTRs, right? Like say like an 08, 09.
You're talking like an R35.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So something like that, right? If you get into like those early ones, they have transmission issues. If you want to get
Yes.
into like a sheepy built trans, you're looking at spending like 20 grand. Like that's
Yep.
not like so like if you can't afford to drop 20 grand on a trans, you probably shouldn't spend 60 grand on that car because just because you can afford to pay $1,000 a month for it, that doesn't mean shit when it comes time to actually fix it. Like you want to
Yes.
put bigger turbos on that, or you want to do the fuel system on that. Like your fuel system is going to cost you 5 grand for that car. It's
Yeah.
not the same as like and like even Subarus are kind of relatively expensive. Like I always joke like, oh, like being in a Subaru, like every mod's going to cost you $1,000, but it
They
will.
are.
Like
They're pricey.
they,
Yeah.
they are pricey kind of for what they are, but like they do offer a pretty good value, I think, between like other things. And this is
Yeah.
why I tell people, and kind of going back to that like good platform thing where it's like, if you really want to do this and you want to be about it, but you don't want to get screwed, buy the good platform. Go buy the S550 because you could be 15 grand into a blower, a fuel system, and some wheels
Yeah.
and tires, and you can run the tens. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to break the bank to enjoy something or to meet a goal even. You just need to be kind of smart and plan what you're doing around that.
But now this is my devil's advocate on, or my opposition on you, is if you don't have a ton of money, go buy the cheaper car. Go
Yeah.
buy the less optimal car, the less optimal build. Learn what you can do. Use that as an opportunity to eke out 5, 10, 15 horsepower, right? You haven't done cams before. Go find a car that you can do some cheap cams on, right? Go build an old Civic. Go build something, right? But just learn the parts. Go like, hey, you want to learn suspension? Go buy a car that you can get cheap adjustable arms on, right? Or like, making adjustable arms isn't that expensive. You got a buddy that's got a machine shop? You could probably make those in a weekend without too much difficulty. And you're probably going to fuck them up and break them and whatever. But then you learned and you did it on the cheap. And that's, right, like for me, that is the side of like, I think the side of car modification that's just gone. And the reason why I love the TC comment so much
Yeah.
is that is just, it's gone because people aren't looking at it anymore. And I want to see people do that. And you don't care that your car isn't fast. You should care that your car is the way that is the way that you made it.
Right.
That
Yeah.
you have that direct control to make it what you want.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think like really my only point in there was that
I
like
understand your
if you
point.
have a goal set, like if it's like
Yes.
I really want to have a 10-second car.
I want to go be competitive on the drag strip.
Yeah.
I want to go drive in FD. I want to go do grip
like
racing and yeah, absolutely.
to kind of like just finish it off, right? For this segment. If you want to build a drift car, you don't have to spend 30 grand buying some RB or LS swapped 240 that has 20 grand worth of all kinds of stuff in it.
Nope.
Go spend 4 or 5 grand and buy that new Edge, with you can put a posi in it, you can do some suspension. You don't need to even add power to these cars most of the time.
Not
you can
really.
just go slide it with minimal suspension work. Your consumables are low, and that kind of stuff is what's going to actually get you out to the track. You could focus on actually paying for your day at the track to hang out. You could actually focus on being like, oh, okay, well, now that I'm not 20 grand into a car, you could buy the car, a truck, a
Yes.
trailer, and
Yes.
pay for an entire season for that same 20, 30 grand
Yep.
in a lot of
Yep.
cases. And so, like, there are plenty of cheap options to go and do stuff. I feel like a lot of people just get way caught up in like what's cool, what's popular, and what's there already. And like, do your research. Actually look at this stuff and be like, yeah, okay, I can find these in my area cheap, you know? And like, granted, SN95s in your area might not be cheap, but maybe something else is. Maybe
Exactly.
that 128i that's been sitting on the corner, you could go and buy something like that.
Yeah.
And you could get into it and you could go drift it and not be a ton of money in. Just
Yeah.
actually think and be conscious about the budget and your
Yes.
goals, and make smart choices from there. Is really
Absolutely.
all I think that most people really need to just kind of do a better job at.
And I completely agree. So, with that, we had other segments planned, but like we're at an hour already just talking about how the car modification scene has changed. So, I think we might leave those for another time. And that's cool because that just means I have to do less work prepping for the next one. So, anyway, right. This is the Zero Camber podcast. Mike and Brendan, or Whoop. You can find us at Zero Camber. I think it's at the Zero Camber actually on most social medias: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. If you want to call it X, don't follow me. Anyway, so yeah, we are out there, or we will be out there because this is going to come out at some point in the future, and things will have changed, and something's going to happen that's in the next few weeks, and people are going to be like, the Clarno story was 3 months ago, and it's like, okay, man, I'm sorry, we recorded this in early June. Get off my buddy. I stopped myself. So.
Did a better job than me because
yeah.
I wouldn't have.
So anyway, this is like I said, this is Zero Camber. You can find us on all our your favorite social medias, and of course you can follow us individually at MikeGropX on Twitter. Probably not going to find me anywhere else for a while, and
at Whooper2Real. And if you guys enjoyed hanging out with us for this first episode of the Zero Camber podcast, we really appreciate it, and we'd actually really appreciate if you guys would go down in that comment section below and drop a topic that you'd like to see in a future episode, because we can only come up with so many ideas between the two of us, and if you guys are going to hang out with us, you might as well be a part of the fun, and maybe we'll get to your topic. So
yeah, I think so. And it's if you follow us early, there's a really good chance we're going to get to your topic because nobody else is dropping them. So
exactly, so you could get a head start.
Yes,
if you drop your topic down there.
First to market advantage.
Early adopter.
Yeah, we're not first to market, that's for damn sure.